what we cherish.
He's a man many call a monster.
He needs to rot in jail for this.
Hull funeral director Robert Bush was entrusted to look after the dead by grieving families.
I trusted him with the most important person in my life, one of my children, and he let me down.
Instead, he pretended to cremate bodies, kept them in storage at this funeral home, and gave families unknown material, saying it was their loved one's ashes.
Did I really get my dad? Did I really get my mum? We'll forever wonder whether I actually have or not.
So this is where it all began. This is Hessel Road in Hull city centre, and 2 years ago this was the site of Legacy Independent Funeral Directors. Another business has taken over the building now. But back then, on the 8th of March 2024, it was a business owned and operated by Robert Bush, until police got a tip from a whistleblower with concerns about how the dead were being treated in there.
Inside, officers made a grim discovery. 35 bodies in varying states of decay, as well as a large quantity of ashes.
There's the devastating loss of losing him, and then it feels like you have to go through it all again. It's losing him all over again.
One of the deceased found here was a man called Danny Middleton. He had lived near the Hessel Road funeral parlour. For his family, it had seemed an obvious place for him to lay in rest.
I didn't have the chance to go and see him, which I totally regret. I wish I had done. I might have spotted something, I don't know. But mind you, there was signs at the actual funeral, and we just played it off. You know, we think, oh, grief.
What sort of signs?
The coffin, too small. He was a big guy, you know, chubby guy, and we don't reckon he was in that coffin. It was too small for him to fit in it.
Was Danny then cremated? Or you believed that Danny?
Yeah, we believed he'd been cremated, yeah. And his son went and picked up ashes. I had my nieces who was wanting to take, you know, bits of the ashes and put them in jewellery or whatever they wanted to do. Luckily, they hadn't got to that yet. And then this happened. The first thing is, well, who we got? What was they doing? Why have they still got his body? Have they done anything to his body? What was he going to do?
It was 4 months between what the family thought was Danny's cremation and his body being found. Police identified him by a hospital band that was still on his wrist.
Just thinking about him just laying there and being forgotten when he wasn't that kind of guy. We all loved him to bits, and you start thinking, well, we've let you down. We went there, and that's when the anger starts getting in, because you just, we just felt like we'd let him down.
Robert Bush was eventually charged with 30 counts of preventing a lawful and decent burial relating to the bodies found at this site, as well as counts of defrauding their families. He was also charged with 4 counts of defrauding 4 women who'd come to him after losing their babies in pregnancy, who are now uncertain whether the ashes they have are those of their unborn children. Jasmine Beverley lost her son at 20 weeks gestation. She called him Sonny and asked Robert Bush to organise his funeral and cremation.
I said to my husband, I don't want anybody else. I want Rob to do it.
Why?
Because he did my father's funeral in 2013, and the kindness that he showed me and my family, I couldn't have wished for a better service.
So you trusted him?
Implicitly trusted the man. It was a beautiful service. It was small, just grandparents, my husband and I, and it was just a way that we was to say goodbye to our baby. So yeah, it was nice.
The family later went and collected the ashes that they believed were their sons until they saw the news on TV.
And then we got a phone call from the police saying that they wanted to come and see us. And I was like, who do you think it is, my dad or my son? So they came and they said, we've found Sonny, what we believe to be Sonny, which was a moment what just stood still. It was hard to hear that because of how long it had been.
And how long had it been by that point?
Nearly 2 years. Yeah.
Were the police confident that the body they had found was of your son?
They said that they believe that it's Sonny because the coroner has opened what they described as a package, and when they opened it, I believe my bracelet with my name was on there with him.
Could you believe that someone you had trusted so implicitly could have done this to you and your family?
No. I trusted him with the most important person in my life, one of my children, and he let me down. It's evil. That's all I could say. It's evil.
Police had also found ashes of more than 50 people at the Hessel Road site. Bush was charged with defrauding their families. He also admitted to mis-selling funeral plans to more than 200 others, spending the money they'd given him for their future funerals for his own purposes.
Do that to our loved ones that we cherish. Why did you do it?
At earlier plea hearings, he was accosted by heartbroken, angry families.
So this was your dad's photo album?
It was at court that we met Jo Moody, who told us about her father, Peter.
Bonfire night was our night, mine and my dad's and our Stephen's.
The family had asked Bush to organise Mr Moody's cremation, and the funeral service itself was run in Legacy's dedicated on-site chapel.
What did you think had happened at the end of that funeral service?
I thought I'd just sent my dad to where he needed to be.
But months later, police came to Jo's door to tell her her father's body had been found at Legacy.
How can you be so cold to destroy as many lives as he's destroyed? Bush took away what memories I could have had. Yeah, I've got some happy memories, don't get me wrong, but they always come. His face and that Legacy building always come into my head somewhere along the line.
The family held a second funeral, but was still haunted by what Bush had done.
I stood in front of the coffin and I looked the vicar in the eye. And I asked her if that was my dad in that coffin. That poor woman. She looked at me and said, I can promise you, your dad's in there.
Why do you think he did what he did, Robert Bush?
Because he's a money-grabbing, evil, heartless person.
There was no on-site crematorium at the Hessel Road funeral home. Instead, Bush would use money given to him by families to pay for cremations off-site. Or that's what he was meant to do.
We now know that Legacy was in real financial trouble. Robert Bush owed Hull City Council more than £50,000 in unpaid cremation fees, and there are several filings on the company's house website showing creditors trying to force him to declare bankruptcy in the years leading up to his arrest.
There'd been occasions where his cheques had bounced, and I did offer to help him with his paperwork because he said he felt overwhelmed.
We spoke to a funeral celebrant employed by Robert Bush to lead services. She tells us he'd started cutting corners when it came to money. We're hiding her identity because association with him now in this industry in Hull is toxic.
What was your impression of him?
He was a bit of a cheeky chappy. We got on well, very polite, well-spoken, and seemed very empathetic and generally a nice guy, and I think that's what makes everything that's happened since so disgusting. Things started becoming cheaper. On the Hessel Road site where he had his chapel, when I first conducted a service in there, it looked very untidy. He wasn't actually there, and me and a member of his staff had to bring the deceased into the chapel. And a number of florists had stopped working for him because he hadn't paid his bills, so he started actually doing his own flower arranging. At one point, he did turn up at one of the local crematoria with a coffin that was substandard. I believe he was making them up himself, almost, unfortunately, like flat pack furniture.
Was there any sort of suspicion about the scale of what was happening there?
Absolutely no idea. I personally don't know the burial that I did for him, whether I've actually buried the right person. Where was it going to end? How was he going to dispose of all the bodies?
This memorial garden has been established in Hull to give families somewhere to remember loved ones whose bodies or ashes were found at Legacy. Plaque after plaque, a reminder of the sheer scale of this scandal that's galvanised calls for scrutiny of an industry that's always regulated itself.
If this is happening on a street in Hull, this is happening across the country. I don't believe he's the only one.
Karen Dry used Legacy services when both her dad Alan and mum Betty passed away. She collected their ashes from Robert Bush.
Did I really get my dad? Did I really get my mum? And they can't do any DNA on the ashes because obviously it's cremated. There's no DNA to be had. So we'll forever wonder.
So will you ever have certainty?
No. I hope no one ever ends up in the situation that me and the families that have found themselves in this, I hope it never happens to anyone else. And until we get legislation in, it's got every possibility that it will.
Funeral services in England, Wales and Northern Ireland have no specific government oversight, which means there's no legal code of conduct or mandatory local authority inspections. Trade bodies exist, but they're voluntary with no enforcement powers. Bush had even been part of one of them, but he'd stopped paying his membership fees, although he still advertised that he was part of the group.
If you are a member of one of the two main trade bodies, then they will inspect a business probably every 2 or 3 years. And yes, they have the power to remove or refuse membership. But the problem is that even if that happens, a funeral director can still continue to operate. So regulation and having an inspection and regulatory regime which had teeth and powers to enforce would be a welcome part of the funeral directing sector.
Whether anything changes or not, for Hull families, there are still so many unanswered questions. Why did this happen? How? And what next? But above all, there's a deep anger at what Bush has done to them, to their loved ones, in their darkest hours.
The amount of grief and turmoil and literal torture that we as families have felt over this, just because if it is greed, just because he's greedy, absolutely turns my stomach.
I want to know why. I just want to stand and ask him why. Can I have all the coppers he stood there? I just want to be able to look him in the eyes. Why?
He's a disgrace. He's not a human being at all. He's a monster. He's got no heart, no compassion, no nothing. And he needs to rot in jail for this, for what he's done to everybody.